Mr. S. R. Nelson, 6th President of the Republic of Singapore, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Institute of South Asian Studies, or ISAS, I warmly welcome you to this afternoon's book launch for Resurgent China, South Asian Perspectives. To start off, it is my pleasure to invite Professor Tan Taeyong, Director of ISAS, to deliver the opening remarks. Professor Tan, please.
President of the Republic of Singapore, Ambassador Resurgent, Ambassador of Korea, Ambassador Mr. Fatma Kala, Director of Egypt, Ambassador Chan Hing-wing, Singapore High Commissioner to Bangladesh, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon to all of you, and a warm welcome to a book launch, Resurgent China, South Asian Perspectives. Now, I have a little hand in this book. But today my role is a slightly different one. I am standing in for Ambassador Gopinath Pillai, Chairman of ISAS, to welcome all of you. So I will leave the discussion and the talk on the book to my co-editor, Professor Muni, who will speak a little while later. This is the second book that we have launched in a space of about 4 days. Last week, Friday, some of you would have attended the launch of our book by Professor Raja Mohan on Sino-Indian maritime rivalry in the Indo-Pacific region. The book generated a lot of discussion, a lot of useful debates, and we are very happy that following Prof. Raja Mohan's footsteps, we are now able to launch a second book, also on the theme of Sino-Indian issues. Now, this book will deal with the way South Asian countries perceive the rise of China, and it is a theme, Sino-Indian relations, that ISAS is particularly interested in developing, and these two books attest to the efforts that we have put in to study this relationship. Now, this book was earlier launched in Delhi last year by Vice President Ansari. And it also generated much interest when it was launched and discussed in India. So we are grateful to all of you for coming this afternoon to participate in this discussion. Now, I wish to express my deep gratitude to President Nathan for taking time. Again, we had to impose on him to do this launch, although he was already here last week to launch the earlier book. We had originally planned for the two books to be launched together, but in true character, Mr. Nathan felt that this would not do justice to the two books, so he insisted that the books be launched separately so that we can have proper discussions of the two volumes. And while it would, I'm sure, cause him inconvenience to come twice, he gamely insisted that he would be happy to do so if we were to organize them separately. So hence, these two separate book launches. Now, following the launch, there will be a panel discussion, and I'm grateful to my friends and colleagues, Prof. Rajesh Bajpayee, Prof. Raja Mohan, and Ambassador Chan, for agreeing to discuss the book. And I'm sure following the discussion, you will have your thoughts about the book and also the comments made, and I hope that this will generate further discussion. So on that note, it is now my pleasure to welcome you and to invite the President to deliver his opening address. But before that, the MC will have to say a few things to invite the President.
Thank you, Professor Tan. It is now our pleasure to invite Mr. S. R. Nelson to deliver his special address. Mr. Nelson, please.
Professor Tan Taeyong, Director of ISAS, Professor S.D. Muni, Your Excellencies, ISAS delegates, distinguished members of the audience, ladies and gentlemen. I'm extremely happy to be here with you at the Singapore launch of this important edition of edited volume entitled Resurgent China, South Asian Perspective, published by Routledge and edited by ISAS Professor Tan Tai-yong and Professor Muni. China's rise has been received with a mixed feeling of awe, admiration, and anxiety. While China's economic growth and dynamism has amazed everyone, its growing military might and periodic assertion in pursuance of its perceived interests has raised concerns in several capitals around China's neighborhood. How China is viewed in the world today is a subject with which scholars are grappling with. I'm glad that ISAS has provided a platform for researchers in ISAS as well as others in different areas of scholarship to study this particular question. This volume, the first to study how South Asian countries perceive the rise of China, will elucidate the delicate intricacies and relationships as well as concerns and opportunities of individual South Asian nation states vis-a-vis China. As the studies have shown very clearly, the results of South Asian states, the reactions of South Asian states to the rise of China are varied and driven by different considerations and interests. India stands by a category of itself for having sharply defined positive as well as negative perceptions for China's rise. Indeed, the trajectory of the Sino-Indian relations will also have an impact on South Asia as a whole. While India views China's growing economic and military might with apprehension and anxiety, its other South Asian neighbors are generally comfortable with the rising China, which they see as a source of economic support as well as a credible counterbalance to India. And among these smaller South Asian states that sees China's rise as a positive development, Pakistan stands out in its perception of China as an all-weather friend. The inclusion of perceptions from the smaller nations of South Asia in this volume therefore provides readers with a more nuanced understanding of China's standing in the South Asian region. The contributors to this volume offer authoritative and insightful analysis on the subject matter. The list includes not only former ministers Syed Javed Bhakti of Pakistan and Dr. Iftikhar Ahmad Chaudhry of Bangladesh, both attached to ISAS, but also senior diplomats Jayanta Dhanapala of Sri Lanka, Shafi Sami of Bangladesh, and Shampuram Simkhada of Nepal, and other internationally recognized scholars knowledgeable on South Asia as well as China. The contributions have critically examined the many domestic factors and stakeholders, including business lobbies, military and intelligence establishments, political parties, and ideological groups which shape the perceptions and policies of the respective countries towards China. The multiple perspective and layered analysis, taking into consideration domestic and regional issues, make this volume a well-rounded and deep study. When India's Vice President Sri Hamid Ansari launched this volume in Delhi last year, it generated a lively debate among Indian scholars and policymakers gathered to discuss the content of the book. I hope our own panel today that discusses the book will do an even more lively one. Before I conclude, I would like to say a few words about the editors, Professor Tan and Professor Muni. As a historian, Professor Tan Tai-yong provides a useful academic foundation, while Professor Muni's on-hand experiences in the strategic and diplomatic avenues in various countries in South Asia, as well as the academic world of strategic affairs, provides this book with an advantage of intellectual range and real-world experience. I thank the editors for their hard work and wish both of them and ISAS every success in this and their future endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Norton. May I now invite Professor S.D. Winnie, co-editor of A Resurgent China, South Asian Perspectives, to give us an introduction of the book. Professor Winnie, please.
President Norton, sir, I join Professor Tanta Yong in expressing my gratitude to you. You have really honored us, and we feel privileged for taking all the trouble to come to this launch function. I must also thank the chairman of the ISAS and the director of the ISAS, including the staff which facilitated this project. And on the top of it, the project would not have been complete without a very distinguished group of contributors, former ministers, some of my colleagues who are here, senior diplomats, established scholars, and young researchers. We tried to get contributors from all the South Asian countries except perhaps Bhutan, where we had to depend upon a Westerner because our efforts to mobilize somebody failed. We also, though we wanted to and planned, could not include contributions on Maldives, Afghanistan, and Myanmar. Myanmar may be under debate whether we should treat Myanmar as a South Asian country or Southeast Asian country. But we tried, and if we could get it, I think that would have provided a very different spectrum of views ranging from Afghanistan to Myanmar on China. Now about the book, I wish Prof. Tan had summarized or given the contents of the book, because he did a brilliant job in New Delhi when we had this launch earlier. But it is his order, and I follow his command. When we come to the perceptions are often interest-oriented, and they are shaped by experiences and advantages or disadvantages which countries or people derive from each other. Therefore, perceptions are always evolving. They are always changing. India and China had a wonderful Indichini Bhai perception, and it turned into some of the, at certain point of time, worst adversaries of each other. Now they are again being, therefore it's a process which is not final in any sense. But when it comes to China and South Asia, there are two facts which we must keep it in mind. One is that China is South Asia's new and distant neighbor. Why I say new neighbor? Because South Asian countries have mostly dealt with Tibet until 1950. The real-time interaction between South Asian societies and China was extremely limited and distant, because the hub of the Chinese political, economic, and social life lies far away from Tibet or from the South Asian boundaries. They were divided by the Pamirs and the Himalayas, and until Tibet was taken over, the Chinese did not get worried about what South Asia may be up to or not up to so far as their periphery is concerned. There is a vague knowledge between the two societies, civilizations, whatever you call it, and extremely limited engagement, also constrained not only by the mountains, but also by the handicap of language and the differentiation of culture. There is no Chinese diaspora as in Southeast Asia, in South Asia. Therefore, the regular interaction and formal relations have been very constrained. Why I emphasize this? Because India, on the other hand, looms so large, almost at every point of life in South Asia, that comparatively you find lesser the engagement, lesser the points of friction. More the engagement, more the points of friction. This is a subject which I think would be debated by the panelists, but I just want you to keep it in mind that this is a hard reality under which the Chinese and the South Asian engagement has grown. The second important factor is, from the China's point of view, South Asia is China's farthest. South Asia is located on China's farthest and most vulnerable periphery. Both Xinjiang and Tibet are the disturbing points of the Chinese decision makers and have remained for a long time. I think before 2008, there was a certain impression created that by material development of Tibet and also by flushing in money and moving populations, perhaps the Tibet issue is resolved. But no way. I think 2008 proved it very differently. And because of this sense of vulnerability as to what happens in Tibet, I think China both needs the support and cooperation of South Asian countries. Support because in order to control the restive populations or the kind of turbulence which might arise in one way or the other, either in Xinjiang for a very different reason or in Tibet for yet another reason, that regular crossing of the border by the Tibetan population into South Asia has been a real headache. And there are several instances of China persuading, pleading, pressurizing the South Asian countries not to let that happen. Cooperation because all these are landlocked areas of China. And for developing landlocked areas, you need access and a way to get out. Compare this with, for instance, when China had to develop Yunnan, they had to depend very heavily on the Indo-China countries, Myanmar, Laos, to get an outlet for goods, for services, for interaction. For Xinjiang, for instance, or Inner Mongolia, Central Asia is crucial, and China has gone and developed SCO as an organization to see that it happens. There is no such formation so far as South Asia is concerned until recently, when China came and became an observer in SARC. This was an issue which was referred last time, that look, India will have to accommodate. I was about to mention at that time when the discussion was on, that it was almost a barter deal, unspelled out barter deal, where China accepted India in East Asia, where it was resisting, East Asia Summit, where it was resisting for a number of years, and India lowered its resistance to Chinese entry into SARC as an organization, both as observers and also SCO as an organization, both as observers. And at both the places, China is keen to become a full member, at least some of the South Asian countries are keen to make China a full member of the SARC. And India, including Russia, is keen to see if India could become a full member of SCO. East Asia Summit is a different. Therefore, you see this, that if Tibet and Xinjiang have to develop, they cannot really fully develop without a very facilitated interaction and engagement with the neighboring areas which are in South Asia, the population density apart. Now, when we keep these two factors in mind, as President Nathan has been very kind to mention, this book explains that the perceptions of the South Asian countries is a mix of admiration and anxiety. There is an admiration all around, including in India, for China. Sometimes we go with the misperception of the media hostile headlines. For China's economic dynamism, for its manufacturing sector, for agriculture, for the way they are dealing with the financial institutions. China has also been a source of support, even in terms of trade and investment, for instance. All the South Asian countries have welcomed it. Except India, many of the and I would say in some ways even India, look towards China as a strategic support. Call early 50s if you want to. When tremendous pressure from US and the Western Alliance and China and India in Chini bye-bye, the strategic ground was prepared by mutual support to each other. There are instances where China did not establish diplomatic relations with some of the South Asian countries because India pleaded with China that if you do that, then Americans would get a greater excuse to come and fortify themselves in India's periphery or in South Asia. And China for at least 6 to 7 years accepted that proposition, delayed its diplomatic relations with some of the countries in South Asia. So there is a general acceptance, positive attitude towards China in South Asia. But there is also an anxiety, and anxiety comes out of two main factors, the balance of payment and balance of power. The balance of payment, because the tremendous trade which takes place between China and the South Asian countries is essentially negative from the South Asian point of view. That they import more than they export more, and there is an uneasy sense of dependence, an uneasy sense of this negative trade in Bangladesh, in Sri Lanka, in Pakistan, in India. Some of the business practices of dumping, etc. is being resented. And all these countries have very quietly been putting it on the table to the Chinese in official negotiations. The balance of power is a bug which has bitten, of course, the India-China relationship more seriously than other countries, because other countries don't see in China the kind of threat theories which you read in academic journals about Southeast Asia and China does not exist so far as South Asia is concerned. Therefore, these two, both admiration and anxiety, is mixed in the perceptions of the South Asian countries. If you look at India, it's almost equally strong so far as admiration is concerned and so far as anxiety is concerned. I'm not weighing them. There is no mechanism to weigh whether anxiety is more than admiration. But in Pakistan, the anxiety is very feeble, but it is there, including in terms of the role of extremists, which China have been cautioning Pakistan several times that it should be controlled. And other South Asian countries, I think there is a strong admiration and somewhat anxiety on economic and other matters. China has very carefully cultivated the positive aspect of these perceptions by cultivating the constituencies and stakeholders who create that positive perception. And for nursing these constituencies, it has aid, economic assistance, investments, political support, scholarships, jaunts, they used everything. And also to remove the negative component, whenever these countries have felt very uncomfortable or uneasy vis-a-vis India because of several points of interaction and pressures, China has come forward to assure these countries that they will support them in their security, in their independence, in their national integrity, or whatever. In fact, many a times, it is India's lapses in South Asia which have been cashed upon and if not exploited, cultivated by the Chinese to their advantage, and why not? I think any other country would be doing that. I think these are some of the aspects of the book. Hope if and when you get a time, you will get through it, but more of it from the panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Muni. May I now request Mr. Nathan and Professor Tan to join Professor Muni at the front, please. gentlemen, Mr. Nathan will be taking his leave. Please join me in thanking him for spending his time with us. We shall now commence the panel discussion on Rising China and Emerging India, Impact on South Asia. May I request Dr. Sindhapal Singh, ISAS's Research Fellow, and the following panelists to take their seats at the head table, please. Ambassador Chang Heng Wing, Professor Rajesh Pasrur, Professor C. Rajamohan, and Mr. Kwa Chongguan. Dr. Sindhapal Singh will moderate the panel discussion.